Alright, it's finally time for peak. I can't believe Invincible Season 3 is already over. It went so fast. Also, I saw Prime Video post this like 20 minutes after I finished watching the finale. Know your audience, right? The finale of Invincible Season 3 is here, and like good little worms, we all stood ready for its arrival. This episode is nothing short of fantastic, epic, intense, and from what my sources have told me, very comic accurate. But before we get to the final showdown of Invincible Season 3, I just want to remind you all to hit the like and sub button if you've been enjoying my coverage of Invincible Season 3. And you can expect plenty more of Invincible related content on my channel, like updating my episodes tier list, some character deep dives, as well as a few other things I got planned. So if you want to see all that, be sure to stick around. But enough banter, enough bullshit. Let's talk about Invincible Season 3, Episode 8. I thought you'd never shut up. Spoiler warning, by the way. This episode starts off directly from where the last episode left us off. And this shot of Mark and Conquest like connecting their punches and the shockwave it creates, beautiful. Conquest kicks down Mark right away and begins one of his many monologues. And I have to say right off the bat, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who did the voice for Conquest, he was the perfect fit for the role. The cadence in his voice just fits Conquest perfectly. And let's be honest with ourselves, Conquest isn't some Viltrumite savior. He doesn't give a flying rat's about building utopia. All he cares about is
feeling the warmth of my fists drenched in blood.
Jesus Christ, and I thought the alternate evil Marks were metal as This guy is on a whole nother level, in a whole different field, playing a completely different sport. But Mark gets offended that Conquest is taking up all of his screen time and decides to ram him through a bunch of buildings and somehow ends up buried in the rubble at the end of it. Conquest pulls Mark out of the rubble and desperately begs for more. And it's here that we see Mark pull off what might be his greatest combo attack yet. Slams Conquest's bionic hand, conks him in the head, and kicks him back. God, this fight is peak. You have to watch it for yourself if you haven't. And if you haven't watched it and you're watching this right now, what the fuck are you doing here? Conquest praises Mark for his efforts, and Mark, feeling like the fucking man, retorts,
"That was just a warm-up."
I cannot overstate how no amount of anything that any reviewer of this show gives, it will never do these lines and this fight justice. Mark then yeets Conquest into space, and oh shit, first blood goes to Mark. Conquest probably let him do that, but considering how tough and durable Conquest probably is, Mark must have hit him pretty hard. And then we get whatever the hell this is. Is Conquest, like, declaring his love for battle here, or is he saying that he's gonna destroy Mark's heart? Because if we go for the latter, then this is technically foreshadowing. The pain train moves back down into the atmosphere, and Mark questions if Conquest is sure that this will still go his way. And then we get this absolute beauty of a line delivery.
Damn near certain.
Seriously, that line delivery, it could not have been more perfect. Then the fight cuts to news coverage, and we see Oliver suiting up for the fight in the Grayson household. And Debbie doesn't try to stop him, but she does advise him to not let him grab you. That's some good advice. Mark's turn for blood. Oof. This next sequence is a beautiful action shot of Conquest bolting at Mark, and then the impact causes this to happen. Do I even need to say anything? The animators and budget managers spared zero expense with this fight. As Mark is getting flung around, we actually get some POV shots of Oliver trying and struggling to keep up, and I am a big sucker for flying POV shots. But as Mark is hurtling through all these buildings, what I should have been thinking was, geez, Mark is getting his ass kicked, huh? But all I could think about after last episode was, they just finished rebuilding like half the world. What the fuck, Conquest? You know how much taxpayer money you just wasted? Mark makes an attempt at a surrender. He shouts at Conquest to stop when he realized that he's probably not gonna win this one. But Conquest ain't built to accept surrenders. Not to mention
I am having the time of my life here.
Conquest proceeds to state that Mark still might have a chance. You know, it's still possible. And that Mark might just be lacking the right kind of motivation. Good and bad timing, Oliver. And of course, basic foreshadowing, Oliver gets grabbed by Conquest, but thankfully, Mark doesn't let that nightmare scenario play out. Conquest then proceeds to call Mark an idiot, because in the time Conquest would have spent killing Oliver, he could have come up with a plan to maybe outwit Conquest. That's kinda dark, but also kind of true. And I'm not saying Mark should have let Oliver die or anything, I'm just saying in scenarios like that, like, yeah, you could come up with a plan if someone else pays the price for it, or if the enemy gets distracted by another combatant. Just saying. And after some more fighting, Conquest states that he will not believe Mark has a Viltrumite heart until he sees it beating in his hand. Yeah, it's probably a good thing there's less than 50 of these guys, huh? Thankfully, Mark gets a cheeky headbutt and some punches in. But...
If that's all you got, this is just not gonna end well for you.
Honestly, with how this is playing out, I think Cecil puts it best.
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
At the GDA, we learn that Cecil and his chop shop are trying to turn the dead evil marks into Reanimen, so Viltrumite Reanimen. But they aren't ready yet, and yeah, Cecil has a serious problem with bringing people back from the dead. It might be like an addiction or something. Eve finally wakes up and she sees what's happening on TV. The nurse urges her to not go after Mark, but Eve calls for Cecil. And meanwhile, Conquest is complaining that fighting Mark is too easy. Still fun, he says it's still fun, but too easy. It's like Conquest has prestiged like 100 times, so everything is really easy, but he still enjoys the gameplay, you know? After knocking Mark into a bus, Conquest brings up Mark's dad. Conquest revels in the fact that Nolan has been executed, and he uses that information to taunt and piss off Mark. Of course, we, the audience, know he's still alive, but Mark doesn't know that. So this is pretty solid setup for when Mark and Nolan inevitably reunite. As Conquest is about to finish the job, Oliver swoops in once again, saving Mark's life for a second time. Look, I know this is meant to be a super serious fight where we're supposed to be like, oh my god, how is Mark gonna beat this guy? But this next line, combined with the delivery, it makes Conquest sound like a car salesman.
But thanks for coming back.
You cannot deny that with that accent and that line delivery, Conquest sounds like a southern truck dealer from like Virginia or something. Feel like I would hear that in an infomercial, you know? Mark tells Conquest to stay away from Oliver. Okay, I'm sorry I'm laughing here, but the way Conquest just Gmod no clips towards Mark and then just bitch slaps him is just... it's just so priceless. Conquest tries to pull a Thanos and attempts to rip Oliver in half. And apparently, in the Invincible comics, Oliver sort of visibly starts to rip in half, like his skin starts tearing and stuff like that. But we don't see that in the show. However, we do hear it. And honestly, hearing all sorts of like muscle and bone and organy noises just like starting to stretch and give way, and hearing their integrity be compromised as they reach the brink of snapping, it is surprisingly gruesome and uncomfortable. The sound design of that sequence is utterly incredible. You can't see the pain, but you can hear it, and that kind of makes you feel it. But Mark intervenes and gets Conquest off of Oliver. He doesn't get very far, but he does take one on the chin to put one on Conquest's chin. To my surprise, Cecil personally accompanies the GDA medics to recover Oliver. Like, Cecil has no reason to be this close to danger, like personally. Cecil could have easily not gone, like at all. Period. But by going there in person and going there himself, that signals, to me at least, that Cecil wants to do everything he himself possibly can to assist with this situation. You know, he doesn't just want to use all his resources and whip out all of his toys and guns. Like, he himself wants to do something. He wants to act. I don't know, that's just how I interpreted it. But back to the GDA, and Cecil is arguing that Eve isn't cleared for combat. Eve argues that her ability to rearrange and manipulate matter might be their only chance to beat this guy, and Cecil argues,
Don't ask me to do this.
I think Cecil's meaning here is like, don't ask me to ask you to go out there. But Eve says that he doesn't really have a choice. And then we cut to a scene that mirrors Mark's fight with his dad in season 1. Conquest holds onto Mark's head and pushes him through a city as bodies are eviscerated and destroyed the minute they come into contact with him. Even the framing of the shot is very similar to the train scene. But as they're done going through the city, Mark manages to punch Conquest off of him. And then Conquest is stopped by one of Eve's barriers. We get this close-up of Mark's eye as his heart just stops in fear, and this little moment adds so much to this fight. Eve is mad at Conquest for giving Mark the violent bad touch and tells Conquest to piss off, and Conquest is like, hey, that's a great idea, and he guns it for Eve. Mark tries to stop him, but his poor little ham bone gets popped right out of his leg. Also, I have to say this slightly out of concern, but this scream that Steven Yeun delivers here sounds too real. Here, have a listen. Too real, am I right? Hopefully they weren't doing any extreme method acting behind the scenes. After Mark falls to the ground, Conquest realizes that his new toy is broken because he played with it too hard. And Conquest decides that Eve is now his new Discord kitten. I'm not kidding. He calls her
Kitten?
Eve conjures some armor from her energy barriers and, I'm not kidding, stops Conquest dead in his tracks. Now, I'm going to play a clip here, and I want you to tell me what you think Eve did to stop him.
What?
Did Eve A. create an invisible barrier, B. take control of Conquest's mechanical hand, C. learn to use the Force, or D. stood her ground and said no like a confident woman? Go ahead, pick your answer. If you picked A, B, C, or D, you are wrong because the answer was E. She increased the density of the air around Conquest. There is no version of this shot that doesn't make me think that she didn't do something to Conquest's mechanical hand. His mechanical hand is not sentient matter, a thing that Eve can control and manipulate. And with how this shot is framed and how the sound design plays around it, I bet you 99% of you and 99% of viewers thought that she did something with his hand before revealing that she did something fuckery with the air density. It might seem like I'm angry or upset at this, but I'm actually not that upset. I just think it's a missed opportunity to display Eve's intelligence, her precision with her abilities, and her immediately recognizing one of Conquest's weakness. A weakness that I might add, she is perfectly suited to exploit. Hell, she did exactly that in episode 6 when she gummed up Powerplex. And yeah, changing the air density and making it more dense to prevent him from moving is a show of her intelligence and finesse with her ability. This is all true. But imagine how cool it would have been if Eve loosened or messed up Conquest's mechanical hand in some way. And then later when she's losing consciousness, she whispers to Mark, his hand, Mark. And then afterward, we see Mark annihilate Conquest's mechanical hand. Not only would it be a great display of Eve's ability, but it would be a great display of the two of them, how they collaborate, and how great of a team they make. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up this side rant now because this has taken up way too much of the script. But please, in the comments, tell me if my idea is actually genius, or you think I'm just crazy out of my mind for trying to insert insane amounts of meaning into every little thing. Eve is getting tired of Conquest bullshit and tries to pull a Thanos herself by trying to suffocate him, just like how Thanos suffocated Cyclops with a glass cube. And in all honesty, Eve puts up a pretty good fight here and she uses her powers in some pretty creative ways. With a character who has abilities like Eve, it's important to use them in interesting ways, both their abilities and their character, just like when Eve gummed up Powerplex in episode 6. And the trend keeps going as Eve turns one of her giant pink balls into a giant ball of water in an attempt to disorient Conquest. Creative, looks cool, makes sense. Good use of character. But this is Conquest we're talking about, okay? He doesn't like women who talk back to him, so he breaks in Eve's jaw and opens up her chest. Then we have this moment of Mark holding Eve as she's suffocating and dying, and Mark is begging for Cecil to come help, and he's just struggling to grasp that this is actually happening. It is so sad and genuinely heart-wrenching, and the performances really make this scene. Even though Conquest gives us some creepy dialogue about understanding Mark's affinity for humanity and lesser creatures after licking off some of Eve's blood from his hand, he's not all over-the-top villainy and creepy. He is still a warrior, and he shows Mark some actual respect here by saying this.
Not long now, huh? If you've got anything to tell her, I wouldn't wait.
Conquest, you bastard. I am trying so hard to hate you after you just killed Eve and made Mark cry, but you're making it very difficult by being so comically evil and yet respectable at the same time. It's just... Stop being such a good character. But Mark, in his grieving, angry, and just horrid state, delivers what might be the best line from the comics that I know about.
I can see the future. You don't live to see tomorrow.
Mark then proceeds to break Conquest's mechanical hand, which is weird because he broke it earlier in the video. If I had a nickel for every mechanical hand broken in this video, I'd have 2 nickels. It's not very much, but it's weird that it happened twice. As Conquest goes to monologue again, Mark just hits him, and he keeps hitting him until Conquest gives him a big old bear hug. And Conquest makes the fatal error of saying that,
Getting mad doesn't make you stronger.
but he doesn't know that Mark is an avid anime viewer and has this human thing called adrenaline. So Mark fucking rips out Conquest's collarbone with his mouth. I think we've reached the peak of metal here, folks. The two are flying around and hitting each other some more, creating more shockwaves, and these shockwaves are passing through Eve's body. When I first watched this scene, I thought that the shockwaves did a cheeky CPR and got Eve's heart bumping again because they were just so intense. But seeing as we only visibly see one shockwave go through Eve's body, I think it was just more of like a super loud, annoying alarm clock type deal. Also, it woke up Eve's, inner goddess. And due to the trauma of being brought to the brink of literal death, her mental block that prevents her from going God mode gets overwritten, so Eve turns on the God mode hack. And when Mark notices this, Conquest tells him to pay attention and pins Mark to the ground. And it's here that Conquest delivers a legitimately, beautiful speech. And as far as I know, this speech and this line delivery / monologue, I guess, is not in the comics. Conquest explains that he's lonely. He explains how all the other Viltrumites are afraid of him, and they treat him more like a weapon instead of like a person. And most importantly,
Conquest. I don't even get a real name.
As Conquest puts it, he's a victim of his own success. He even admits to Mark that some days he's so lonely, he feels like crying. But what would be the point in crying? He doesn't have any friends or anyone that would care that he's crying. Fucking hell, dude. This character is getting more development in one episode than a lot of other characters get in an entire season. You cannot just drop that kind of bombshell on me and get me to feel some level of sympathy for this man all of a sudden. Seeing this expression on Conquest's face for a couple seconds genuinely made me think that, oh, maybe he's gonna let go of Mark's throat and give him some kind of join me and we'll make a deal, like, you know, maybe you add me on Facebook or something. But I think, nay, I know, what we got was so much better and so much more in line with his character.
Take it to your grave.
As Conquest is putting Mark in his grave like he promised to 2 seconds ago, Eve comes along in her super goddess form and, fries Conquest like a chicken wing. Remember that thing you said, Conquest? It was a piece of advice you gave to Mark about fighting. It was really simple. It was a really simple but really important piece of advice. God, it's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, I remember now. Oh yeah, that's right. Pay the fuck attention! Mark starts his beatdown of Conquest and very quickly gets his other hand broken. But I think Mark has learned the value of headbutts in this fight, and he, headbutts Conquest to death. Well, at least Conquest gets some pretty fucking good final words.
I take the good with the bad.
This scene of Mark crawling over to Eve and both of them saying, I love you, and just such a, God, the performances are just so good. This moment, even though something horrible just happened, this moment's just so tender. And as Eve is passing out, she's questioning if she's naked. Yes, you are, Eve, and I'm probably going to blur it to err on the side of caution. Then the GDA crew shows up and, Tech Jacket! Look, people, it's Tech Jacket! It's Tech Jacket! Oh my god, it's Tech Jacket! It's powwow time at the GDA, right after Cecil is finished yelling at Sinclair. Eve explains her mental block to Mark, and Debbie apologizes for, quote, everything. She says how disgusted she is at herself for every time she ever asked Mark, did you get your powers yet, when Mark was growing up. It's just a genuine, heartfelt apology to her son that she loves with all of her heart. She gets guilt off her shoulder and shows her son all the sympathy and love and compassion in the world. Could not have wrote this scene better myself, even if I tried. Mark demands that Cecil shows him Conquest's body, and yeah, he's pretty dead. Mark tells Cecil to burn it, and the way Cecil says,
Yeah.
is pretty convincing that he agrees with Mark that they should, you know, try not to bring this one back. We then cut to a very beautiful funeral for our friend Rexplode, and it's here we learn something pretty interesting. Remember in season 2 when we saw the future Guardians and future Eve called Rudy Rex, and that was really confusing, for me anyway? Well, at this funeral, Rudy expresses how much he admired, respected, and kind of looked up to Rex, and in honor of his friend, will be legally changing his name to Rex. Which, like, yeah, that does track out for linking up those two storylines. But in my humble opinion, that statement would have carried a lot more weight if we actually saw some of this admiration and respect and general just liking Rex from Rudy. Off the top of my head, I really can't remember any moments where Rudy showed like significant or even minor admiration or respect for Rex. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but nothing's coming to mind. Eve goes up to the podium to say some things about Rex as well, and she kind of struggles to really say much of anything because she loved Rex and this is really devastating for her. And during this scene, I thought back to the scene in season 2 where Eve was crying over Rex when he was in the hospital after he got shot in the head. Samson then goes up to the podium to talk about Rex as well, and then the scene abruptly fades away, which is fucking bullshit. Let me hear the heroes I know praise, love, and just utterly drown Rex's spirit in love, affection, compassion, respect, and express their grief of how sad they are for at least 3 minutes. Fuck you, make the episode 5 minutes longer for Rex's funeral. It's still a good scene, but it deserved so much more. But I do appreciate this scene of Eve venting to Mark about Rex. Eve points out how Rex had matured so much and how he had become this genuinely good person. And she also starts to break down in tears because she didn't get to say goodbye. Segs. But before we cut away from the segs, we see Mark's costume sitting in a pink glowy fluid, and it's looking a little bit melty. According to my Agents of Chaos and my comic insiders, because Eve came back from the brink of death, her powers are a little bit wonky right now. And in the comics, instead of this pink fluid stuff, a flower bloomed on top of Mark's costume. And that was to display the fact that Eve could in fact create living things. I would have preferred the flower, honestly, because this scene made no sense to me until I had someone else explain it to me. And of course, as Invincible finales go, we get set up for the next season. Sequids are evil, Battle Beast retrieval, Angstrom's a little weasel. What the fuck is this, Cecil? Okay, that's it, Cecil. I'm calling NA. Oh, what is NA, you ask? Well, you see, it is an acronym for Necromancers Anonymous, because Cecil has a very clear addiction and needs help. Also, what's that fucking thing made out of?
He's in a 400-ton block of tungsten steel alloy 6 miles underground.
Huh. Invincible Season 3 really made the tungsten cube meme canon. To round off the season, we have Mark and his brother having a little talk. And it's here that Mark completes his arc for this season. Mark agrees with Oliver that the next time any mega supervillain ever threatens anybody he cares about or his planet, he will not hesitate to take their life. Because sometimes to save lives, you must also take some. Mark previously refused to kill anyone, especially after he killed Angstrom. Then when Angstrom returns and Mark is all surprised that he isn't dead, Mark gets a chance to kill Angstrom and make things right. But Mark hesitates for just a second long enough for Angstrom to get away. The same cannot be said of Conquest, because Mark didn't hesitate, and he won't hesitate ever again. Wait a second, you're telling me we get this random 3 minutes of fuck shit with dark blood, but we can't give those 3 minutes to Rex's funeral? Okay, look, I actually like Damien Darkblood, not because he's a complicated character, but because he's funny and he fit very well into the season 1 plot and created a lot of drama and intensity to said plot. But that's why I like him. He was part of the season 1 plot. That's where he was best suited and best used. I would have much preferred that extra screen time and animation budget and animation work to go to Rex's funeral, hearing what Samson and the others have to say about him. But, because this is Invincible and the writing's very good, if this new Damien Darkblood plotline, which isn't in the comics apparently, if this new plotline turns out to be really good and have a nice underlying element across the entire next season, or is a really good self-contained episode and makes for a good self-contained story, then I won't complain. But with all that, my friends, that's it for Invincible Season 3. There is so much to talk about in so much more detail, and I will definitely be making some dedicated videos to talk about said things. And I have to say, I think Season 3 might just be the best season of Invincible as of current. Satisfying arcs, amazing villains, Machine Head's return, new heroes for future seasons, and most importantly, Mark and Eve finally getting together. Covering these episodes has been a whole bunch of fun, and like I said, I have a whole bunch more Invincible related content planned, like, for example, updating my episodes tier list, which is actually happening on Wednesday. So if you want to stick around to see that, as well as some of the other stuff I have planned, then definitely consider hitting the like and sub button. Invincible is one of my favorite shows right now, and honestly probably one of my favorite shows ever at this point. And judging by how well my videos have done and how much support you've all given them, clearly you all enjoy it as well. And if you want to show me a little bit of extra support and help me make better content, then definitely consider becoming a channel member. Not only do you get a whole bunch of exclusive rewards, but you also directly support me in the process, and I would just appreciate it a whole bunch. But that's gonna do it for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day, everyone.